The widow's cabin had fallen into chaos, and Ethan Winters knew he was drowning. He stood in the doorway of what had once been his and Sarah's home, watching as his 3 children turned the small kitchen into something resembling a battlefield. 6-year-old Thomas had somehow gotten flour all over himself and was now tracking white footprints across the floor. 4-year-old Margaret sat crying in the corner because her brother had knocked over her tower of wooden blocks. And little Emma, barely 2 years old, had climbed onto a chair and was reaching for a pot that teetered dangerously on the edge of the stove. "Thomas, stop," Ethan said, his voice coming out more tired than stern. He crossed the room in 3 strides and caught Emma just as she grabbed the pot handle, lifting her away before disaster could strike. The little girl wailed in protest, her face turning red as she kicked her legs. It had been 8 months since the fever took Sarah. 8 months of trying to manage the farm, care for the animals, plant the spring crops, and somehow keep 3 young children fed, clean, and safe. He was failing at all of it. The fields were barely tended. The house was a mess. And his children, these precious souls that Sarah had brought into the world, were suffering for his inadequacy. The neighboring women had helped at first, bringing casseroles and offering to watch the children for an afternoon here and there. But they had their own families to tend, their own responsibilities. He could not keep imposing on their kindness. He had tried doing it all himself, but the farm needed him during the daylight hours, and the children needed him every moment. There were not enough hours, not enough hands, not enough of him to go around. Thomas had started acting out, seeking attention through mischief. Margaret had grown quiet and withdrawn. And Emma, sweet Emma, who looked so much like her mother, cried whenever he left her sight. He needed help. He needed someone who could stay, someone who could watch the children while he worked the farm that was their livelihood. But hiring help cost money, and money was something he had precious little of since Sarah's illness had drained their savings. He had asked around the village, inquiring about young women who might need work, but the responses had been discouraging. The few available girls wanted wages he could not afford, and most were already employed at the inn or helping their own families. It was old Thomas Brennan, his nearest neighbor, who had made the suggestion that changed everything. "There's an orc woman who's been staying in the old hunter's shack up near the North Ridge," Thomas had said, lowering his voice as if sharing something scandalous. "She came down to my place last week asking if I had any work. I sent her away, of course, but if you're desperate, Ethan, and not particular about who watches your youngsters." Ethan had felt his stomach turn at the suggestion. An orc. They were the enemy, or at least that was what he had been raised to believe. During his time in the territorial militia, he had seen the aftermath of orc raids. He had heard stories of their savagery, their violence. The thought of allowing one into his home near his children felt like madness. But that night, as he tried to rock Emma to sleep while simultaneously helping Margaret with a splinter, and listening to Thomas complain about being hungry again, desperation began to override prejudice. What if Thomas Brennan was right? What if this was his only option? The next morning, Ethan left the children with Mrs. Brennan for a few hours and made the trek up to the North Ridge. The hunter's shack had been abandoned for years, ever since old Jeremiah had died. It was barely more than 4 walls and a roof, drafty and isolated. As he approached, he saw her. She was sitting on a stump outside the shack, mending what looked like a torn shirt with careful stitches. She was tall, probably as tall as he was, with broad shoulders and strong arms. Her skin was a deep forest green, and her black hair was pulled back in a practical braid. Small tusks protruded from her lower jaw, and her ears came to slight points. She wore simple traveling clothes that had seen better days, and her feet were wrapped in cloth instead of proper boots. She looked up as he approached, her yellow-gold eyes meeting his with a directness that made him falter in his steps. There was intelligence in that gaze and wariness and something that looked like resignation. "You are from the village," she said. It was not a question. Her voice was lower than a human woman's with a slight roughness to it, but she spoke clearly and without accent. "I am," Ethan said, stopping a respectful distance away. His heart was pounding and he felt foolish for it. She was just a woman, albeit an orc. She was not attacking him. She was sitting calmly, sewing. "My name is Ethan Winters. I have a farm about 3 miles south of here." "I know who you are," she said. "The widower with 3 children, the one who is struggling." Heat rose in his cheeks, so his situation was common knowledge even to outsiders. "I am looking for help," he said, forcing himself to maintain eye contact. "Someone to watch my children while I work the farm. I was told you were looking for work." She set down her sewing and stood. She was indeed as tall as he was, which was unusual. Most human women came only to his shoulder. "You were told correctly," she said. "But I am an orc. You would trust me with your children." "I am desperate," Ethan said honestly. "I need help. If you are willing to provide it, I am willing to pay." She studied him for a long moment. How much? He named the sum he could afford. It was not much, barely more than room and board would cost. He expected her to refuse, to laugh at the insult of such a low wage. Instead, she nodded slowly. "I accept. When do I start?" "Today," Ethan said, relief flooding through him so powerfully that his knees felt weak. "If you are willing. I can show you the farm, introduce you to the children, explain their routines." "I am willing," she said. She gathered her few possessions into a worn pack and turned to him. "My name is Grukka. I will work hard for you and I will keep your children safe. That is my word." As they walked down the ridge toward his farm, Ethan found himself stealing glances at his new employee. She moved with confidence despite her worn clothing, her head held high. She did not try to make small talk, which he appreciated. His own tongue felt tied in knots, unsure what one said to an orc. When they reached the farm, Mrs. Brennan was in the yard with the children. She took one look at Grukka and her face went pale. "Ethan Winters, what are you thinking?" she hissed, pulling him aside while Grukka stood waiting. "That is an orc. You cannot seriously mean to leave your babies with a monster." "She is not a monster," Ethan said quietly. "She is a woman who needs work and I need help. I would appreciate it if you would keep your concerns to yourself." Mrs. Brennan looked like she wanted to say more, but she pressed her lips into a thin line and shook her head. "On your head be it," she muttered, and left in a hurry, casting fearful glances back at Grukka. Thomas and Margaret stood frozen, staring at the tall green woman with wide eyes. Emma, in Ethan's arms, had gone very still and quiet. "Children," Ethan said, kneeling down so he was at their level. "This is Grukka. She is going to be staying with us and helping to take care of you while I work on the farm. I want you to be polite and respectful to her." "Is she a monster?" Thomas asked, his voice small. "No," Ethan said firmly. "She is a person just like you and me. She looks different, but that does not make her a monster." Grukka stepped forward and lowered herself to one knee, bringing herself down to the children's height. The gesture was so unexpectedly gentle that Ethan felt something shift in his chest. "You may be afraid of me," Grukka said, addressing the children directly. "That is natural. I look different from you, but I promise that I will not hurt you. I am here to help your father and to keep you safe and fed and happy." Margaret, who had not spoken much since her mother died, took a tiny step forward. "You are green," she said softly. "I am," Grukka agreed. "And you are not. We are different in many ways, but we are also the same in some ways. We both have 2 hands, 2 feet. We both need food and water. We both need shelter and warmth. and we both want to be kind to those around us. "Do you eat children?" Thomas asked suspiciously. "Thomas," Ethan exclaimed, horrified, but Grukka just shook her head. "No. I eat the same things you do. Bread, vegetables, meat, fruit. Not children." Emma, who had been watching silently, suddenly reached out from Ethan's arms toward Grukka. The orc woman looked surprised, but she extended her hands, and Ethan, after a moment's hesitation, passed the toddler over. Grukka held Emma with practiced ease, settling the little girl on her hip. Emma reached up with one chubby hand and touched one of Grukka's small tusks with curious fascination. "Careful, little one," Grukka said gently. "Those are sharp." "Pretty," Emma said, which was one of her few words. Grukka's expression softened in a way that made her look almost vulnerable. "Thank you," she said quietly. Ethan showed Grukka through the house, explaining the children's routines as best he could. Thomas liked to play with his wooden soldiers. Margaret enjoyed her blocks and her rag doll. Emma needed to nap after lunch and could not be trusted near the stove or anything sharp. They ate at morning, midday, and evening. Bath time was a battle. Bedtime was often accompanied by tears and requests for water and stories. Grukka listened to everything with careful attention, asking clarifying questions about the children's preferences and habits. She examined the kitchen, taking note of where things were kept. She looked at the sleeping arrangements and did not complain when Ethan showed her the small room off the kitchen that had once been Sarah's sewing space. It was barely large enough for the narrow cot he had set up there, but Grukka simply nodded and set her pack down. "This is fine," she said. "Better than the shack." That first day, Ethan found himself anxious and distracted. He kept making excuses to come back to the house to check on things. Each time he found Grukka calmly engaged with the children. She had gotten Margaret to smile while they built a tower together. She had settled Emma for her nap without any fuss. She had redirected Thomas's energy into helping her sweep the flour he had spilled the day before. The house, when Ethan returned at dinner time, was cleaner than it had been in months. The children were fed and content. And Grukka had somehow managed to prepare a simple but hearty stew from the meager supplies in the pantry. "You did not have to do all of this," Ethan said, looking around at the swept floors and tidied rooms. "The children are easier to care for when their environment is orderly," Grukka said simply. "And cooking for 4 is barely more work than cooking for 1. They ate together at the table, the children chattering about their day. Ethan found himself watching Grukka, noticing the careful way she ate with her tusks, the gentle way she wiped Emma's face when the toddler got stew all over herself. After the children were in bed, Ethan and Grukka sat at the table drinking tea. "Why are you here?" Ethan asked finally. "On this frontier, I mean, living in an abandoned shack. Most orcs stay with their clans." Grukka's expression became guarded. "Most do," she agreed. "I am not most orcs." "What happened?" She was quiet for so long that he thought she would not answer. Then she sighed. "I helped a human child who was lost in the woods near my clan's territory. I brought her back to her family instead of leaving her to die or taking her as a hostage. My clan considered this weakness. They cast me out." Ethan felt his breath catch. "You were exiled for showing mercy." "Orcs do not value mercy, particularly not toward humans," Grukka said. Her voice was steady, but he could hear the pain beneath it. "I have been wandering for 3 months, trying to find work, trying to survive. Most humans see my face and turn me away. Some throw stones. Your neighbor, Thomas Brennan, threatened me with his hunting rifle." Guilt twisted in Ethan's stomach. He had almost not come to find her. He had almost let his prejudice stop him from offering her this chance. "I am glad you helped that child," he said quietly, "and I am glad you are here." Grukka met his eyes and he saw surprise flicker across her face. "You are a strange man, Ethan Winters." "So I have been told," he said, managing a small smile. The days turned into weeks, and slowly the farm began to recover. With Grukka managing the household and children, Ethan could focus on the work that had been neglected. He repaired fences, tended the crops, and cared for the livestock. He fell into bed each night exhausted, but with a sense of accomplishment he had not felt in months. The children thrived under Grukka's care. Thomas's acting out decreased as he received consistent attention and boundaries. Margaret began to speak more, her quiet voice growing stronger each day. And Emma, who had been clingy and fearful, became more independent and cheerful. Grukka proved to be endlessly patient and creative. She taught the children games from her own childhood, adapted to be less rough. She told them stories of the forest and the animals that lived there. She showed them how to identify different plants and which ones were safe to eat. The villagers, however, were less accepting. When Ethan brought the children to the village for supplies, people stared and whispered. More than one person asked him if he had lost his mind, hiring an orc. The blacksmith's wife actually crossed the street to avoid him, pulling her own children with her. "Let them talk," Ethan said when he returned home and found Grukka looking troubled. "They do not understand. They do not see what I see." "What do you see?" Grukka asked. He looked at her, really looked at her. At the way she was mending Margaret's favorite doll with careful stitches. At the way Emma was curled up against her side, sleeping peacefully. At the way Thomas was showing her a drawing he had made, seeking her approval. "I see someone who cares for my children as if they were her own," Ethan said. "I see someone who works hard and asks for nothing beyond what was promised. I see someone who has made my house a home again." Grukka's eyes glistened with what might have been tears, but she blinked them away. "You honor me with your words," she said softly. Summer came on in full force, bringing heat and long days. Ethan worked from dawn to dusk, and Grukka managed everything else. They fell into an easy rhythm, a partnership that felt natural despite its unusual nature. Ethan found himself looking forward to the evenings, when the children were in bed and he and Grukka would sit together at the table. They talked about everything and nothing. She told him about orc culture, about their clans and traditions. He told her about his life before Sarah's death, about his dreams for the farm. He began to notice things about her that had nothing to do with her usefulness as help. The way her laugh, rare as it was, sounded like music. The way her eyes crinkled at the corners when Margaret said something clever. The way she hummed while she worked, old orc songs in a minor key that were strangely beautiful. He noticed the strength in her arms when she lifted Emma, the grace of her movements despite her size, the way the sun caught in her black hair and made it shine. And he felt guilt, because these were not the thoughts one should have about an employee, about an orc, about anyone when his wife had been dead less than a year. But the thoughts persisted. One evening in late July, a summer storm rolled in with frightening speed. Thunder crashed and lightning split the sky. Emma woke screaming, terrified of the noise. Ethan rushed to comfort her, but she would not be soothed. Grukka appeared in the doorway of the children's room wearing a simple nightdress. "May I try?" she asked. Ethan nodded, stepping aside. Grukka gathered Emma into her arms and began to sing. The song was in Orcish, the words incomprehensible, but the melody was gentle and soothing. She rocked the little girl slowly, her deep voice steady beneath the sound of the storm. Emma's cries quieted to hiccups, then to silence. She buried her face against Grukka's shoulder and relaxed into sleep. Grukka laid her carefully back in her small bed and tucked the blanket around her. When she turned, she nearly collided with Ethan in the small room. They stood close, closer than they had ever been. He could see the flecks of gold in her yellow eyes, could smell the herb soap she used on her skin, could feel the warmth radiating from her body. "Thank you," he whispered. "She is a sweet child," Grukka whispered back. "All of your children are. You and your wife made beautiful souls." "Sarah would have liked you," Ethan said, the words coming out before he could stop them. "She always said kindness was the most important quality in a person. She would have seen past what you are to who you are." Grukka's expression was soft in the dim light. "I wish I could have known her." "I wish you could have too," Ethan said. They stood there for a moment longer, the air between them charged with something unnamed. Then Grukka stepped back, breaking the spell. "Good night, Ethan," she said. "Good night, Grukka," he replied, but sleep did not come easily that night. He lay in the bed he had once shared with Sarah, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand what he was feeling. He was attracted to Grukka. There was no denying it anymore. It was not just gratitude for her help or appreciation for her work. It was something deeper, something that made his heart race when she smiled and his stomach flip when their hands accidentally touched. But this was wrong on so many levels. She was an orc. She was his employee. He was still mourning his wife. What would people say? What would his children think? He wrestled with these thoughts for days, trying to bury the feelings that would not be buried. He tried to maintain distance, to keep their interactions purely professional. But it was impossible when they lived in the same house, shared meals, worked together to care for the children. And then there was the question of whether she felt anything for him. He thought he saw something in her eyes sometimes, a softness when she looked at him. But perhaps he was imagining it, projecting his own feelings onto her. The answer came in August, during the harvest. Ethan had hired a few men from the village to help bring in the wheat. It was hot, hard work, and everyone was focused on the task. Grukka had brought water and food out to the field for the workers. One of the hired men, a young hothead named Jack Morris, started making comments. "Never thought I would see the day when Ethan Winters let a greenskin onto his property," Jack said loudly. "Much less into his house, around his children." "That is enough, Jack," Ethan said firmly. "I am just saying what everyone is thinking," Jack continued. "It is not natural." "She is not natural. Orcs are savages. Monsters. My pa says they should all be driven back beyond the mountains." Grukka had gone very still, her face carefully blank. She set down the water jug and turned to leave. "Wait," Ethan said. Then to Jack, "You are done here. Take your pay and leave my property." "What? But the harvest is not finished." "I do not care. I will not have that kind of talk on my land. Grukka is part of this household and she will be treated with respect. If you cannot manage that, you can leave." Jack threw down his scythe. "Fine." "You are a fool, Winters. Everyone knows it. You have lost your mind along with your wife." He stormed off toward the village, leaving his pay behind. The other workers shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. They needed the money too much to make a stand. Ethan found Grukka in the barn, ostensibly checking on the goats, but he could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands shook slightly as she scattered feed. "You did not have to do that," she said without turning around. "He is right. I am an outsider. I do not belong here." "He is not right," Ethan said firmly. He crossed the barn and gently touched her shoulder, turning her to face him. "You do belong here. You are part of this family." "I am an orc," she said, and her voice cracked. "Your employee, nothing more." "You are more than that," Ethan said. The words were coming now, unstoppable, the feelings he had tried to bury rushing to the surface. "You are so much more than that. You are the person who saved this family when we were falling apart. You are the reason my children smile again. You are the reason I can sleep at night knowing they are safe and loved. You are the person who makes this house feel like a home, and you are the person I have come to care for more than I ever thought possible." Grukka stared at him, her eyes wide with shock. "Ethan, you do not know what you are saying." "I know exactly what I am saying," he said. He took her hands in his, feeling how much larger they were than his late wife's had been, how strong. I am saying that I have feelings for you, feelings that go beyond employer and employee, beyond human and orc. I am saying that when I think about my future, you are in it. You and the children and this farm, all of it together. This is madness, Grukka whispered. Your people will never accept it. They already hate me. If they knew you had these feelings, if they knew we were anything more than what we are supposed to be, they would drive us both out. They would take your children from you. Then we will leave, Ethan said recklessly. We will go somewhere else, somewhere more accepting. The frontier is wide. There are places where people care more about a person's character than their skin color. You would give up everything for this. For me, Grukka asked, and tears were streaming down her green cheeks now. Yes, Ethan said simply, because you are worth it. Because what I feel for you is real and true and worth fighting for. Oh, Ethan, Grukka said, and then she was kissing him. It was nothing like kissing Sarah had been. Grukka was taller. Her tusks required a slightly different angle, her lips were fuller and her skin warmer. But it was perfect in its own way, a rightness that settled into his bones and made him feel more alive than he had in years. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Grukka touched his face with wonder. I have loved you for months, she confessed. Since the day you defended me to Mrs. Brennan. Since the first time you looked at me like I was a person instead of a monster. I tried to hide it, to bury it, because I knew it could never be. But here you are, saying these impossible things. They are not impossible, Ethan said. Difficult, yes. Complicated, certainly, but not impossible. Not if we want it enough. I want it, Grukka said fiercely. I want you. I want this life. I want to be a mother to those children who have claimed my heart. I want to wake up every morning in this house and see your face. I want all of it, even if it means fighting the whole world to have it. Then we will fight, Ethan said. Together. They decided to be careful, to keep their relationship quiet until they could figure out a path forward. But in private, in the stolen moments after the children were asleep, they allowed themselves to be together. Ethan learned the geography of Grukka's body, the places that made her gasp and shiver. She learned his in turn, her strong hands surprisingly gentle. They talked for hours, planning a future that seemed both impossible and inevitable. The children noticed the change in the atmosphere, the way their father smiled more, the way Grukka hummed happier songs. Thomas asked if Papa and Grukka were friends now, and Ethan had said yes, they were very good friends. But secrets have a way of coming to light. It was Margaret who inadvertently exposed them. She had made drawings for everyone in the family. One for Thomas, one for Emma, one for Papa, and one for Mama Grukka. Ethan had frozen when she showed him the paper, the careful letters spelling out Mama Grukka above a stick figure with green skin. Sweetheart, he said carefully, Grukka is not your mama. Your mama was Sarah and she loved you very much. I know, Margaret said seriously. Mama Sarah is in heaven with the angels, but Mama Grukka takes care of us now, so she is our mama too. Can people have two mamas? Ethan pulled his daughter into his arms, his heart aching with love and sorrow and joy all mixed together. Yes, he said. I think they can. But when Margaret showed the drawing at the village market, proudly explaining that it was for Mama Grukka, the reaction was swift and ugly. The village elders showed up at Ethan's farm the next day, 5 stern-faced men who sat in his kitchen like judges at a trial. Ethan, we have concerns, Elder Richard Warner said. He was the wealthiest man in the village, owner of the general store and half the land around it. Your daughter has been saying things, calling the orc woman her mother. We need to know what is happening in this house. What is happening is that my children are happy and cared for, Ethan said, keeping his voice level despite the anger building in his chest. Grukka is good to them. She is good for them. She is an orc, Elder Marcus Patterson said. It is unnatural for children to be raised by such a creature. We have been patient, understanding that you were desperate, but this has gone too far. What exactly are you suggesting? Ethan asked. Send her away, Elder Warner said bluntly. Find a proper nursemaid, a human woman. We will even help you pay for one if cost is an issue. And if I refuse, the elders exchanged glances. Then we will have to take measures, Elder Patterson said, for the children's safety. There are provisions in the territorial law for removing children from unsuitable situations. The threat hung in the air like a blade. They would take his children. They had the power to do it, the influence to make it happen. Ethan felt his world tilting. You would rip my children from their home, from their father, because you do not approve of the woman I hired to help me. It is not about approval, Elder Warner said. It is about what is proper, what is right. Humans and orcs do not mix, Ethan. It goes against the natural order. And if you cannot see that, if you have developed some kind of inappropriate attachment to this creature, then perhaps you are not fit to make decisions for those children. Grukka, who had been listening from the doorway, stepped into the room. I will leave, she said quietly. If my presence is causing harm to this family, I will go. No, Ethan said sharply. You will not. Ethan, they will take the children, Grukka said, and he could see the pain in her eyes. Not if we leave first, Ethan said. The decision crystallized in his mind with sudden clarity. I am done with this village. Done with small-minded people who value appearance over substance. There are other places on the frontier. Places that need farmers, places that might be more accepting. You would leave everything, Elder Warner said, shocked. Your land, your home, for an orc. For the woman I love, Ethan said firmly, and for my children's happiness. Yes, I would leave everything. The elders left in a huff, threatening legal action, threatening to have him declared unfit. But Ethan had made his choice. He spent the next week making preparations. He sold what he could, made arrangements to lease his land to a neighbor who was less judgmental. He packed their belongings, taking only what could fit in the wagon. The children were confused by the sudden upheaval, but Ethan explained it as simply as he could. They were going on an adventure. They were going to find a new home where everyone would be welcome. Is Grukka coming? Thomas asked anxiously. Yes, Ethan said. Grukka is coming. She is part of our family now. Margaret beamed. Emma, not fully understanding, clapped her hands. On the morning they were set to leave, Ethan stood in the doorway of the cabin one last time. Sarah was buried in the small graveyard behind the village church. He had said his goodbyes there the night before, placing flowers on her grave and telling her spirit about the new path he was taking. He liked to think she would understand. She had always valued love over convention. She would want him to be happy, to find joy again. She would want their children to thrive. Grukka came to stand beside him. Are you certain about this? She asked. There is still time to change your mind. I have never been more certain of anything, Ethan said. He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. Where we are going, can we be married? Is that something orcs do? Grukka's breath caught. Are you asking me to be your wife? I am, Ethan said. I know we cannot marry here, not legally. But if there is a place where we can, where our union would be recognized, then yes. I am asking you to marry me, Grukka, to be my wife and a mother to my children, to build a life with me, wherever that life may be. Yes, Grukka said, her voice thick with emotion. Yes, 1,000 times yes. They left the village as the sun rose, their wagon loaded with their possessions and their future. Some people came out to watch them go, shaking their heads in disapproval. But a few, a small handful, waved goodbye with what looked like understanding. Mrs. Brennan was one of them. She approached the wagon as they were about to depart and looked up at Grukka with something like apology in her eyes. "I was wrong about you," she said simply. "I see that now. I hope you find happiness wherever you are going." "Thank you," Grukka said, and she meant it. They traveled west, following rumors of a frontier settlement called New Haven that was said to be more accepting of mixed communities. The journey took 3 weeks, the wagon creaking along rough roads, through forests and across rivers. The children treated it as an adventure. They camped under the stars, and Grukka taught them the constellations as orcs saw them, different patterns with different stories than the human versions. They picked berries along the roadside and fished in clear streams. They sang songs to pass the time, a mix of human and orc melodies that blended into something entirely new. Ethan and Grukka grew closer during the journey, their love deepening with each shared sunrise and sunset. They talked about everything, planning the farm they would build, the life they would create. At night, when the children were asleep, they held each other under the stars and spoke of hopes and dreams. They also prepared for the possibility that New Haven might not be what they hoped, that they might have to keep searching, keep moving until they found a place to call home. But when they crested the final hill and saw New Haven spread out in the valley below, Ethan felt hope bloom in his chest. It was a mixed settlement. That much was obvious from a distance. Humans, orcs, dwarves, and even a few elves moving about the streets. Buildings of different architectural styles stood side by side. Smoke rose from chimneys of various heights and designs. They made their way down into the town, and people turned to look at them, but without the hostility Ethan had expected. Curious, yes, but not hostile. They found the town hall where a grizzled dwarf named Thorin Stonebeard served as mayor. He looked over their wagon, their tired faces, and the 3 children peeking out from behind their parents. "Looking for a new start?" Thorin asked. "Yes," Ethan said. "We are farmers, hard workers. We are looking for land to purchase or lease and a place where we can raise our family in peace." "Family, is it?" Thorin looked between Ethan and Grukka, noting their clasped hands. "Human and orc, that is the way of it." "Yes," Grukka said, lifting her chin. "If that is a problem, tell us now so we can move on." Thorin laughed, a deep booming sound. "Problem? Lass, half the marriages in this town are mixed race. My own wife is human, gods help me. We believe in judging folks by their actions, not their bloodlines. You are welcome here, so long as you are willing to work hard and contribute to the community." The relief that washed over Ethan was so profound he thought he might collapse. "We are willing," he managed. "Good," Thorin said. He pulled out a map. "We have several plots of land available. This one here has a small cabin already built, needs some work, but it is sound. Good soil. Access to water. If you are interested, we can draw up the papers." They looked at the plot that afternoon, and it was perfect. The cabin was small but sturdy, with room to expand. The land was rich and fertile, already cleared for farming. There was a barn and a well and a stream running through one corner of the property. "This is it," Ethan said, looking at Grukka. "This is home." "This is home," she agreed. They signed the papers the next day, using most of their savings for the down payment, but it was worth it. For the first time in months, they had security. They had a place where they belonged. The people of New Haven were welcoming in a way Ethan's old village had never been. Neighbors came by to introduce themselves and offer help. A human couple, the Everly family, lived on the next farm over and had 2 children close to Thomas's age. An orc woman named Bracker ran the town bakery and immediately befriended Grukka, delighted to have another orc woman in town. Within a week, they had settled in. Ethan began the work of preparing the fields for the next planting season. Grukka set up the house, making it comfortable and welcoming. The children started playing with the neighbor children, and their laughter filled the air. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Grukka turned to Ethan. "There is a priest in town who performs mixed-race marriages," she said. "Father Donovan. He is human, but he believes love is love, regardless of the form it takes. I spoke with him today." Ethan's heart began to race. "Did you?" "I did," Grukka said. "I asked him what would be required for us to marry. He said we would need to speak with him together to make sure we understand what we are committing to. And then, if we are both certain, he can perform the ceremony." "When do you want to speak with him?" Ethan asked. "Tomorrow," Grukka said. "Unless you have changed your mind." Ethan pulled her close and kissed her. "Never," he said against her lips. "I will never change my mind about you." They met with Father Donovan the next day. He was an older man with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor. He asked them about their feelings for each other, about their commitment to making the marriage work despite the challenges they would face. He asked about the children and how they would navigate blending their family officially. They answered every question honestly, holding hands across the small table in his office. "I have one more question," Father Donovan said at the end. "Why do you want to marry? Not why do you love each other, that is obvious, but why make it official? Why bind yourselves legally when you could simply live together?" Ethan looked at Grukka, and she looked back at him. He knew his answer, and he suspected hers was the same. "Because what we have is real," Ethan said. "Because I want the world to know that she is my wife and I am her husband. Because I want our children to understand that this is a true family, built on love and commitment. Because what we feel for each other deserves to be honored and celebrated, not hidden away like something shameful. Because I want to belong," Grukka added softly. "I have been an outsider my whole life, cast out by my clan, rejected by human society. But with Ethan, I have found a home. Marriage would make that official. It would make me part of something in a way I have never been before." Father Donovan smiled. "Then I will be honored to marry you. Shall we say this Saturday? That gives us time to prepare and for you to invite anyone you wish to attend." They were married on a beautiful autumn Saturday, the leaves turning gold and red around them. The ceremony was held in the small church, which was filled with their new neighbors and friends. Bracca stood as Grukka's attendant, and Mr. Everlie from the neighboring farm stood as Ethan's. The children sat in the front row, dressed in their best clothes. Margaret held Emma on her lap, and Thomas sat straight and proud, watching his father marry the woman who had become their mother in all the ways that mattered. Grukka wore a simple dress that the town seamstress had made, pale green to complement her skin. Ethan wore his best shirt and trousers, his hair neatly combed. They faced each other before the altar, hands clasped, eyes locked. Father Donovan spoke about love and commitment, about building a life together through joy and hardship. He spoke about the courage it took to forge a new path, to create a family that did not fit conventional molds. He spoke about the power of acceptance and the strength found in difference. When it came time for the vows, Ethan spoke first. "Grukka, when I met you, I was drowning. My life had fallen apart, and I did not know how to put it back together. You came into my home and my family, and you gave us all hope again. You showed my children what it means to be loved unconditionally. You showed me what it means to live again after loss. I promise to love you with everything I have. I promise to stand by you against whatever the world throws at us. I promise to build a life with you that honors both of our peoples and creates something new and beautiful. I promise to be your husband, your partner, your best friend for all the days of my life." There were tears streaming down Grukka's face as she spoke her vows. "Ethan, you saw past what I am to who I am. You gave me a chance when no one else would. You defended me when others attacked. You loved me when I thought I was unlovable. You have given me a family, a home, a place to belong. I promise to love your children as my own. I promise to work beside you to build the future we dream of. I promise to be strong when you need strength and gentle when you need comfort. I promise to honor you and cherish you and stand with you against anything that threatens our family. I promise to be your wife, your partner, your heart's companion for all the days of my life." Father Donovan pronounced them husband and wife, and when they kissed, the church erupted in applause and cheers. The children rushed forward, throwing their arms around both of them. "Papa and Mama," Emma cried, delighted. "Family," Margaret said seriously. "We are a real family now." "We always were," Thomas said wisely. "But now everyone knows it." The reception was held in the town square, with tables laden with food and drink. There was music and dancing, and Ethan learned that orcs danced with wild joy, pulling him into the circle whether he knew the steps or not. Grukka laughed as he stumbled through the movements, but she held him steady, her strong arms guiding him. As the sun set and the party continued, Ethan pulled his wife aside to a quiet corner. His wife. He still marveled at the words. "Happy?" he asked. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Grukka said. "You have given me everything I never knew I wanted." "You gave me back my life," Ethan said. "You saved me and my children. How could I not love you for that? How could I not want to spend every day making sure you know how valued you are?" They kissed, soft and sweet, the sounds of celebration fading into the background. The first year of their marriage was busy and full. They worked the farm together, planting and harvesting. Grukka proved to have a natural talent for animal husbandry, and their livestock thrived under her care. Ethan focused on the crops, and the rich soil yielded abundantly. The children flourished. Thomas started school in New Haven and made friends easily. Margaret came out of her shell more each day, her quiet nature blossoming into thoughtful wisdom. Emma grew like a weed, babbling constantly and getting into everything. They all called Grukka Mama now without hesitation. She had fully stepped into the role, loving them fiercely and without reservation. She told them stories of both human and orc culture, teaching them to value both halves of their blended heritage. In the spring of their second year in New Haven, Grukka came to Ethan with news that made his heart soar. She was pregnant. The pregnancy was not without complications. Orc-human births were rare, and there was little knowledge about potential difficulties. But Grukka was strong, and the town doctor, a skilled elf named Alara Silvermoon, monitored her carefully throughout. The children were excited about the prospect of a baby brother or sister. They helped prepare the nursery, painting it in soft yellows and greens. They argued good-naturedly about names and whether the baby would be a boy or a girl. Ethan was simultaneously thrilled and terrified. He had been through this before with Sarah, but this felt different. This was his and Grukka's child, a blend of both of them. A living symbol of their love. On a crisp autumn morning, as the leaves fell in a cascade of color, Grukka went into labor. It was long and difficult, her body working hard to bring this new life into the world. Ethan stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her brow, murmuring encouragement. Dr. Silvermoon remained calm and competent throughout, guiding Grukka through each contraction, each push. And then, finally, there was a cry. Strong and loud and utterly perfect. "A boy," Dr. Silvermoon announced, holding up a squirming, wailing infant. A healthy baby boy. Ethan stared at his son in wonder. The baby had his facial structure but Grukka's green-tinged skin. Tiny tusks were already visible in his mouth. Dark hair topped his head, and when he opened his eyes, they were a striking mix of Ethan's blue and Grukka's gold, creating an aquamarine hue unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. "He is perfect," Ethan whispered. He is ours, Grukka said, exhausted but glowing with joy. They named him Elias Warner, the first name starting with E for tradition, the middle name chosen because it meant guardian in Old Orcish. Elias Warner, born of two worlds and belonging fully to both. The children adored their baby brother. Thomas was protective and gentle with him. Margaret sang him songs and helped with feedings. Emma, not much more than a baby herself, patted his head and called him my baby. The community of New Haven celebrated the birth with enthusiasm. Gifts poured in from neighbors and friends. Grukka brought traditional orc blessing beads to hang over the baby's cradle. The Everly family brought a hand-carved rocking horse for when he was older. Father Donovan came to bless the child, speaking words over him in both human common tongue and Orcish. As Ethan held his son in his arms, surrounded by his wife and children, he reflected on how far they had come. 2 years ago, he had been a desperate widower, drowning in grief and responsibility. He had hired an orc woman out of desperation, never imagining where that decision would lead. Now he had a family richer and more complete than he had dared to hope. He had a wife who was his partner in every sense of the word. He had children who were thriving and happy. He had a home in a community that accepted them for who they were. The prejudice they had faced had not disappeared entirely. There were still those who looked at them askance, who whispered about the unnaturalness of their union. When they traveled to other towns for supplies or trade, they sometimes encountered hostility. But here in New Haven, they were simply the Winters family. Farmers, neighbors, friends. Grukka had found her place not just with Ethan but in the community. She was known for her kindness and her strength. She helped neighbors with difficult tasks, using her orc strength to lift and carry things others struggled with. She taught the orc children in town about their heritage while also embracing human customs. She had become a bridge between cultures. Ethan had found peace with Sarah's memory. He no longer felt guilty about loving Grukka. He understood now that the heart had infinite capacity, that loving again did not diminish what he had felt for his first wife. Sarah would always be part of him, the mother of his 3 older children, his first love. But Grukka was his present and his future, and that was as it should be. The children understood this too. They spoke of Mama Sarah in heaven and Mama Grukka at home with perfect childhood logic that saw no contradiction. They knew they were loved by both in different ways, and that was enough. As Elias grew from infant to toddler, it became clear he had inherited the best of both parents. He had Ethan's curiosity and Grukka's determination. He was strong and healthy, walking early and talking in both human common tongue and Orcish with equal facility. His mixed heritage made him unique, and in New Haven, that uniqueness was celebrated rather than feared. On their 3rd wedding anniversary, Ethan and Grukka took an evening to themselves, leaving the children in the care of the Everly family. They walked to their favorite spot on the property, a small hill that overlooked the farm and the valley beyond. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The crops swayed gently in the breeze. In the distance, they could see the lights of New Haven beginning to glow in the gathering dusk. "You ever regret it?" Ethan asked, pulling Grukka close. "Leaving your clan, everything that led you to that hunter's shack?" Grukka was quiet for a moment, considering. "I regret the pain of exile," she said finally. "I regret losing my family even though I know they were wrong. But do I regret the path that led me to you? Never. Not for a single moment. I regret that we had to leave our first home," Ethan said. "I regret that small-mindedness forced us to uproot our lives, but I am grateful it led us here, to this place, to this life. To this family," Grukka added, "to this family," Ethan agreed. They stood together in the fading light, husband and wife, human and orc, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from the pieces of their broken pasts. Below them, the farm thrived. The crops grew strong. The animals were healthy and content. And in the house at the center of it all, 4 children slept safely, loved and protected by parents who would do anything for them. This was not the life Ethan had planned when he married Sarah all those years ago. It was not the life Grukka had expected when her clan cast her out. But it was the life they had built together, and it was good. The challenges were not over. There would be more difficulties ahead, more prejudice to face, more obstacles to overcome. But they would face them together, as they always had, as they always would, because that was what family did. That night, as they returned to the house and the welcoming chaos of their children, Ethan paused in the doorway. He looked at his wife, her green skin luminous in the lamplight, her smile warm and genuine. He looked at Thomas helping Margaret with a puzzle, at Emma playing with her dolls, at baby Elias sleeping peacefully in his cradle. This was home. This was love. This was everything that mattered, and it had all started because he needed someone to watch his 3 children, and the orc nursemaid he hired had changed their lives, changed them for the better, changed them forever. Changed them in ways he could never have imagined, but for which he would be eternally grateful. Years continued to pass in New Haven, and the Winters family grew deeper roots in the community. Ethan expanded the farm, adding new fields and a larger barn. Grukka started a small garden that became renowned in the area for its vegetables. Her orc knowledge of which plants grew best in certain conditions, combined with human farming techniques, creating yields that impressed even the most experienced farmers. Thomas grew into a serious young man with his father's work ethic and his mother's determination. By the time he was 15, he was working the farm alongside Ethan, proving himself capable and responsible. He had inherited Sarah's quick mind and often helped the younger children with their lessons. Margaret blossomed into a thoughtful, creative soul. She had a gift for drawing and painting, and her artwork began to sell at the market in town. She captured scenes of their family life with such warmth and detail that people from all over the region commissioned pieces from her. Her favorite subjects were her family, especially the moments that showed their blended heritage. Grukka teaching Elias an orc song, Ethan dancing with Emma at the harvest festival, all 5 children playing together in the stream. Emma developed into a spirited, talkative child who made friends everywhere she went. She had Grukka's strength and confidence, unafraid to stand up for what was right. When she was 8, she famously defended a young dwarf child from bullies at school, using words first and fists only when words failed. The incident made her a hero to the younger children in New Haven, and Elias, the child born of 2 worlds, grew into a remarkable boy. By age 5, he was fluent in 3 languages, human common tongue, Orcish, and even some Dwarvish picked up from playing with the mayor's grandchildren. His unique appearance, which might have made him a target in a less accepting place, made him celebrated in New Haven. He was living proof that different peoples could not only coexist, but create something beautiful together. But the family's happiness was not without its tests. When Elias was 6 years old, a delegation from a human settlement to the east came to New Haven seeking trade agreements. Among them was a young cleric named Brother Matthias, who took one look at Grukka and Ethan's family and began preaching about the sinfulness of mixed unions. "It is an abomination," he declared in the town square. "Humans and orcs were never meant to intermingle. These children are an affront to the natural order. That orc woman has corrupted a good human man and polluted his bloodline." Ethan, who had been at the market with Elias, felt his blood boil. But before he could respond, Grukka stepped forward from where she had been shopping with Margaret. "My husband and I have built a good life here," she said, her voice calm but firm. "We work hard. We contribute to this community. We raise our children to be kind and decent people. What exactly about that is sinful? You are a monster wearing the skin of respectability," Brother Matthias spat. "You have bewitched this man, led him astray from his own kind." "I am no monster," Grukka said. "I am a wife and a mother. I am a farmer and a friend. I am a member of this community. And you, sir, are a guest here, one who is being remarkably rude." Mayor Thorin Stonebeard pushed through the gathering crowd. "Brother Matthias, I think it is time for you and your delegation to leave. We do not tolerate that kind of talk in New Haven." "You are all corrupted," the cleric said, looking around at the mixed crowd of humans, orcs, dwarves, and elves who lived together peacefully. "This entire settlement is a sin against nature." "Then leave and go back to your pure human town," Thorin said flatly. "We will manage our trade agreements with settlements that share our values." The delegation left in a huff, but the damage was done. Elias had heard every word, and that night he came to his parents with tears in his eyes. "Am I bad?" he asked. "Am I wrong because I am part human and part orc?" Ethan's heart broke. He knelt down and pulled his son into his arms. "You are perfect," he said fiercely. "You are exactly who you are supposed to be. That man was wrong, Elias, so very wrong." "But he said I was an abomination," Elias whispered. Grukka joined them, wrapping both her husband and son in her strong arms. "Some people fear what they do not understand," she said gently. "They are taught to hate anything different from themselves, but that is their failing, not yours. You are a gift, Elias, a blessing. Never doubt that." "Your brother and sisters love you," Ethan added. "Your mother and I love you. Everyone in this town loves you. One bitter man's words do not change the truth of who you are." Thomas, who had been listening from the doorway, came forward. "Anyone who says you are wrong has to go through me," he said firmly. "You are my brother, and I will always protect you." Margaret and Emma echoed the sentiment, gathering around for a family embrace that left them all in tears. That incident taught Elias an important lesson about the world beyond New Haven, but it also reinforced the strength of their family bond. They were united in a way that transcended blood or species. They were family by choice as much as by birth, and that made them stronger. As the children grew older, they began to make their own choices about their futures. Thomas, at 18, announced that he wanted to take over the farm eventually. He loved the land and the work, and he had a vision for expanding their operations even further. Margaret's art had attracted the attention of a gallery owner from the capital city, who wanted to sponsor her education at a prestigious art academy. It was a difficult decision, but with her parents' support, she decided to go. She would be the first in the family to pursue higher education. Emma declared her intention to become a teacher, inspired by her own experiences in New Haven's integrated school. She wanted to teach children from all backgrounds, to help create more communities like the one she had grown up in. And Elias, wise beyond his years, said he wanted to be a diplomat. He wanted to travel between human and orc settlements, helping to build bridges and understanding between the two peoples. His unique heritage, he believed, gave him a perspective that could be valuable in promoting peace. Ethan and Grukka supported all of their children's dreams, even when it meant letting them go. When Margaret left for the capital, Grukka cried for 3 days straight, but she also packed her daughter's bags with care, including drawings of their family to help with homesickness. She wrote Margaret letters every week, and Margaret wrote back with stories of her studies and the people she was meeting. Life in New Haven continued its steady rhythm. Ethan's hair began to show gray at the temples. Grukka developed a few silver streaks in her black braid. They had been married for over a decade, together for longer, and their love had only deepened with time. They still had their evening ritual of sitting together after the children were in bed, drinking tea and talking about their day. They still held hands when they walked through town. They still looked at each other with the same wonder and gratitude that had marked their early days together. One evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, Grukka said, "Do you remember the day we met? How could I forget?" Ethan said, "I was desperate and terrified, and you were the answer to a prayer I did not know I was praying." "I was alone and hopeless," Grukka said, "cast out by my people, rejected by yours, and then this human man appeared and offered me not just work but dignity. You treated me like a person from the very first moment." "You were a person," Ethan said. "You are a person, a remarkable one." "We have built something beautiful, have we not?" Grukka said, gesturing to the farm, the home, the life they had created. "We have," Ethan agreed. "Against all odds, against prejudice and fear and everything that tried to keep us apart, we built this, together." "I would do it all again," Grukka said. "Every hard moment, every challenge. I would walk every step of that path again if it led me back to you." "As would I," Ethan said. He raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "You are my greatest blessing, Grukka Winters. You and the family we have built together." News came from Margaret that she had fallen in love with a fellow student at the academy, a kind elven man named Aldrich who shared her passion for art. She wrote asking for their blessing to marry him. Ethan and Grukka traveled to the capital for the wedding, bringing Thomas, Emma, and Elias with them. It was the first time any of them had been to such a large city, and the experience was overwhelming in both good and difficult ways. The city was more diverse than New Haven, but also more divided. Different races largely kept to their own districts. There were strict social hierarchies and customs that felt foreign to a family from the frontier. But Margaret's wedding was beautiful. She wore a dress of her own design, incorporating elements of human, orc, and elven traditions. Aldrich proved to be everything she had described: gentle, talented, and deeply in love with her. During the reception, several attendees made comments about Margaret's unusual family. Some were merely curious, others were less kind. One elderly human woman asked Margaret if she was embarrassed to have an orc for a mother. Margaret's response was swift and fierce. "I am proud to have Grukka as my mother. She is the strongest, kindest, most loving person I know. She raised me and my siblings with patience and grace. She taught me what it means to be a good person. If you find that embarrassing, that says far more about you than it does about my family." The woman retreated in a huff, and Margaret turned to Grukka with tears in her eyes. "I am sorry you had to hear that," she said. "Do not be," Grukka said, pulling her daughter into a tight embrace. "I am proud of you for standing up for our family. You have grown into a remarkable woman, Margaret. Your mother Sarah would be so proud, and I am honored to have played a part in raising you." The family returned to New Haven after the wedding, grateful for the vibrant diversity of the capital, but relieved to be back in their small community, where they were simply the Winters family, not a curiosity or a controversy. Emma began her teacher training, working as an assistant in New Haven School while she studied. She had a natural gift for connecting with children, and her dream of creating inclusive learning environments began to take shape. Thomas met a young woman named Alice Anderson, a human girl whose family had recently moved to New Haven. She was practical and hardworking, and she fit into the Winters family as if she had always belonged. When Thomas asked Ethan's permission to propose, Ethan gave it gladly. Thomas and Alice were married in a simple ceremony at the same church where Ethan and Grukka had wed. The circle of life continued, the family expanding to include new members. Elias, at 16, was approached by an organization called the Frontier Peace Council. They had heard of the young half-orc who spoke multiple languages and dreamed of promoting understanding between races. They offered him an apprenticeship, a chance to travel and learn diplomacy firsthand. It was difficult for Grukka to let her youngest child go, but she understood that Elias was meant for great things. On the day he left, she held him close and whispered orcish blessings over him, the same ones her own mother had spoken to her before her exile. "Make us proud," she said. "And remember where you come from." "Always," Elias promised. With the children grown and pursuing their own paths, Ethan and Grukka found themselves in a new phase of life. They were grandparents now, as Thomas and Alice welcomed a daughter they named Sarah, in honor of Ethan's first wife. The baby had Alice's coloring but the Winters family's distinctive features. Grukka held little Sarah with the same gentle care she had shown to all the children, and Ethan marveled at how natural she was with babies even after all these years. "You are a natural grandmother," he teased. "I have had practice," she said, smiling down at the infant in her arms. They continued to work the farm, though at a slower pace now. They hired help during the busy seasons, young people from town who were grateful for the work and the mentorship. Their home became a gathering place for the community. Once a month, they hosted dinners where people from all backgrounds came together to share food and stories. These gatherings became legendary in New Haven, symbols of the kind of unity and acceptance the town stood for. On their 20th wedding anniversary, the entire community threw them a celebration. The town square was decorated with flowers and lights. There was music and dancing and more food than anyone could possibly eat. Father Donovan, now quite elderly, stood to make a speech. 20 years ago, I married Ethan Winters and Grukka in this very church. I will not pretend it was not controversial at the time. There were those who thought I was making a mistake, that I was condoning something wrong. But I knew in my heart that what these two people had was sacred. It was love in its purest form, the kind that overcomes obstacles and transforms lives. In the 2 decades since, they have proved me right 1,000 times over. They have built a family that is a testament to the power of love. They have raised children who are forces for good in this world. They have created a home that welcomes everyone. They have shown us all what is possible when we choose love over fear, acceptance over prejudice. Ethan and Grukka Winters, you are an inspiration to this community and to all who know you. May you have many more years of happiness together." The crowd erupted in applause. Ethan and Grukka stood together, holding hands as they had since the beginning, and accepted the love and appreciation of their community. Later that night, when they were alone in their bedroom, Ethan said, "We did it. We built the life we dreamed of." "We did more than that," Grukka said. "We changed minds. We helped create a better world, even if just in this small corner of it." "I love you," Ethan said. "I have loved you from the moment you knelt down to speak to my frightened children all those years ago. I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "And I love you," Grukka said. "You gave me everything I thought I had lost when my clan exiled me. You gave me belonging, purpose, family. You gave me a reason to believe in goodness again." They lay together in the darkness, two people who had found each other against impossible odds and built something that would outlast them both. The years continued to pass gently. Margaret and Aldrich had 3 children, beautiful blends of human, orc, and elf. Emma married a dwarf named Borin and opened a school in a frontier settlement that desperately needed teachers. Elias's work with the Peace Council took him all over the continent, and his efforts helped establish several new integrated communities like New Haven. Thomas and Alice took over the farm completely, allowing Ethan and Grukka to retire in comfort. They remained in their home, but the hard labor was now handled by their son and daughter-in-law. Ethan's hair went completely white. Grukka developed arthritis in her hands that made fine work difficult. But they remained active in the community, still hosting their monthly dinners, still advising young couples who were navigating mixed-race relationships, still telling their story to anyone who would listen. On a quiet spring morning, 30 years after they had first met, Ethan woke to find Grukka watching him with soft eyes. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how lucky we are," she said. "About how a chance meeting changed everything. About how you needed someone to watch your 3 children, and I needed somewhere to belong, and somehow those 2 needs created all of this." Ethan reached for her hand, his fingers, gnarled now with age, interlacing with hers. "The best decision I ever made was walking up that ridge to find you." "The best decision I ever made was saying yes," Grukka said. They rose and dressed, moving with the careful slowness of age. They made breakfast together, a routine they had perfected over decades. They sat on their porch with their tea and watched the sun rise over the farm that had been their livelihood and their legacy. Children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren came to visit frequently, filling the house with noise and laughter. Each one carried a piece of the family's unique heritage, proof that love could transcend boundaries and create something beautiful. The story of Ethan and Grukka became legend in New Haven and beyond. It was told to children as an example of courage and acceptance. It was studied by scholars interested in successful integrated communities. It was held up as proof that different peoples could not only coexist but thrive together. But to Ethan and Grukka, it was simply their life. A life that had started with desperation and need and blossomed into love and belonging. A life that had faced challenges and overcome them. A life that had created ripples of change extending far beyond their small farm. As they sat together in their twilight years, hands still clasped after all this time, they knew that their story had been worth every difficult moment. Every prejudice faced, every obstacle overcome, every tear shed had led to this. A family united by love, a community transformed by acceptance, and 2 souls who had found in each other everything they had been searching for. He had needed someone to watch his 3 children. The orc nursemaid he hired had changed their lives. But more than that, she had changed the world around them, one act of love at a time, one bridge built, one heart opened. And in doing so, she had proved that the greatest power in any world, fantasy or otherwise, is the power of love that sees beyond difference to the common humanity, or orcness, or essence of life that connects all beings. Their story did not end with a grand gesture or a dramatic finale. It ended the way all good love stories should, with 2 people who had chosen each other every day for decades, still choosing each other, still finding joy in each other's presence, still grateful for the chance meeting that had brought them together and changed everything. And when their grandchildren asked how they knew they were meant to be together, they always gave the same answer. "We didn't know at first. We just knew we needed each other. And then, day by day, we built something beautiful. That is how love works." Not in grand declarations, but in daily choices, in showing up, in choosing each other over and over again. That was the legacy of Ethan Winters and Grukka Winters. Not just a mixed-race family in a fantasy frontier world, but a testament to the transformative power of love, acceptance, and the courage to choose connection over fear. Their story lived on in their descendants, in the community they helped shape, and in the countless lives they touched simply by being who they were. 2 people who loved each other and refused to let the world tell them that love was wrong.